What's good, everybody? It's your boy Rexon Max, and I want to talk about tag fighters. Tag fighters is a genre that I've loved for a long time. It's a genre that really helped me get into the FGC, which we will talk about later in this video. But I want to talk about it because the genre seems like it might as well be dead. Like, if I ask you what's the biggest tag fighter out right now, the hypest tag fighter out right now, what would you say? You can't say it's Dragon Ball Fighters right now with everything that they got going on. You can't say it's MVCI. Tekken Tag 2 has been over a decade ago. So, I mean, which one are you saying? I feel like the one that you could probably say right now is probably Skullgirls. And Skullgirls has been out since 2012. When you think about that, it really puts into perspective why the community might be so enamored with 2XKO. 2XKO is basically in a position where it needs to come and save basically a dying subgenre. But to talk about that, I wanted to talk about the history of tag fighters, where they came from, and how we got to where we are now. So, take this walk with me. Let's walk and see where we came from. Now bear with me as we take a quick trip to 2000. Now of course this is after the Street Fighter 2 boom that set the stage for competitive fighting games. This is after 1991. But I'm one of those person that we got to talk about the grandfathers, the forefathers of the tag genre. Now as I researched this, I wondered what was the first tag game. Of course, you know, a Capcom game would come to your head, like, of course, it got to be Capcom. They innovated so much stuff. But I was thinking it would have to have been something else. Maybe it was something I had never heard of before. Now, when I went and researched it, it was out of two games that it could be the first tag fighter that was ever released. We have a game called Kazuna Encounter Super Tag Battle. And we have the more popular title, X-Men vs. Street Fighter. And as I thought, a Capcom game, X-Men vs. Street Fighter, is the first technical tag game. Now, Capcom released that game on September 9th, 1996, and Kazuna Encounter was actually a close second at September 20th, 1996. So SNK almost beat Capcom at that. And yes, SNK was the one that actually made Kazuna Encounter. So basically, two of the top fighting game makers of all time were actually the two that set the stage in the same month of that same year for tag fighters. Most people from reviews that I see of this game, Kazuna Encounter, basically say it's basically a weird, like, uninspired type game. And by the time they released theirs, Capcom was already doing it better, so a lot of people kind of really didn't take the game too serious. So that leads us to X-Men versus Street Fighter. It was a game I vividly remember growing up, going to arcades, seeing the vibrant colors, seeing the action, everything booming across the screen, 20 different things going on at one time. It was a crazy game. And it had some of your most beloved characters of all time in it. I mean, it's X-Men versus Street Fighter. I mean, come on. That was something that the world had been waiting for. This game was basically like a spiritual successor to X-Men, Children of the Atom, and Marvel Superheroes. Those two games basically set up perfectly for these two worlds to collide and cause such havoc in the fighting game scene. Now, while X-Men vs. Street Fighter was actually doing great, fans was amazed to hear that a sequel was coming so soon, and that sequel released in arcades only a year later. Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter was next, being released in June 25th, 1997. It isn't a whole different from X-Men vs. Street Fighter, but it brings more of the world of Marvel together to take on Street Fighter. New moves for returning characters, new combos, and the assist attack mechanic, enabling characters to jump in during gameplay for a quick or special move. So this went very, very successful for them. Now we're going to start to speed this up as we're trying to get to our year 2000 as quick as we can. But the next year, Marvel vs. Capcom was actually released. Now with this release, it kind of felt like its own thing, even though we knew it was a successor to the previous Marvel Superheroes versus Street Fighter. This game released January 12th, 1998. It came with 100% new hand-drawn backgrounds, new background music, and innovative gameplay systems. In addition to selecting a team of two characters, players can choose a third assist character picked at random by default, or, you know, you could just put in a quick cheat code and pick whatever you want. Now in 1999 is when we start to see other developers coming into the tag realm. Team Ninja released Dead or Alive 2 on October 19th of that year. Now the original DOA didn't have any tag features in it, but DOA 2, it brought that in. But we also had Bandai releasing Tekken Tag that same year. So the first Tekken Tag actually came out in 1999. It was an extremely popular and successful fighting game, both in arcades and on the PlayStation 2, due to its stellar, amazing gameplay. Now we've reached the year 2000. This is the year that we've been trying to get to. This is when the tag fighting genre basically boom, basically took off, basically shot off to the moon. And you know basically what came out that year. This year was the release of Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Now I'll be talking about Evo a lot from here on out, as I'll be using Evo as a way to scale how popular certain tag fighters were during the time. As Evo's first year back when it was called Battle by the Bay was in 1996, but they took a 4-year hiatus and didn't come back until the year 2000. Now MVC2 is probably not arguably to some people, one of the top 5 fighting games of all time, especially when you add in for what it did for the FGC. I mean, it was at Evo for more than a decade, which we'll get into, but people actually weren't too mad about that because they loved the game so much. And at the same time of having MVC2 out, we had Third Strike out, so the FGC was eating good around this time. Now I wonder why they didn't at Evo around that time have Tekken Tag. I believe around that time they were still doing stuff on arcades at Battle by the Bay. I believe they didn't start bringing in arcades and stuff like that at Evo until around like 2003. So I always wondered why they didn't bring Tekken Tag in, but I guess during that time Evo was more so of like a Capcom championship thing. I only say that based off, you know, just looking at the games they had up until 2003. Now another game that came out this year that was a tag fighter, but it really, like, you know, wasn't at the Evos or anything like that, was Street Fighter EX3. That's another game that came out with tag capabilities during that year, the year 2000. Now after the year 2000, you start getting around those years where they start calling it the FGC Dark Age. Now some have this timeline around 2001 to 2008, some have it like 2003 to 2008, but from my research after doing research for this video, I kind of agree and disagree with people saying this is the Dark Age. I disagree because you have so many games that came out during this time that was fantastic games, like Dead or Alive 3, Virtua Fighter 4, CVS 2 came out in 2001, Tekken 4, Guilty Gear X came out in 2002, Soul Calibur 2 came out in 2003, one of the best fighting games of all time. Ask your mom about it. In 2004, you had King of Fighters 2003, which is a good King of Fighters. In 2005, you had DOA 4, which, shout out to Perfect Legend, he's the only person to ever win an Evo title for that game when it was a main game at Evo. Tekken 5 also came out that year. In 2006, you had King of Fighters 11, and in 2008, technically Tatsunoko vs. Capcom released, but that didn't come in America until 2010. And BlazBlue Calamity Trigger actually came out. Now these are all fantastic games that I announced, so I kind of disagree with that statement of the Dark Age, but I also agree because we know that when it comes to the FGC, whether people like it or not, Capcom is basically the company that's steering the ship. They're basically the one that the FGC kind of goes with them and what they're doing. And during that time period that I just said to you, in 2001 was when CVS 2 actually came out, and it wasn't all the way until 2008 technically when Street Fighter 4 released in arcades, but it wasn't until 2009 that Street Fighter 4 actually released in America. But the next blockbuster tag fighter wouldn't come out technically until 2011, and many people know and love this game. It's Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Now with Marvel vs. Capcom 3, its release is kind of one of those things that is talked about a lot, because with MVC3 it came out in 2011, and within 9 months the sequel came out. Now I've talked to some people and asked them about, did they remember what was going on with MVC3 during that time that a sequel came out so fast. I've heard things like the online was pretty bad and the lobby systems were really trash. I've heard people say that they really just didn't like the roster. I've heard people say there was some like combo glitches in the game that they really didn't like. Heard X Factor was a problem, Sentinel in the game was busted. So things like that, Capcom had to start updating and patching the game a lot, but it just got to a point where it was like, look, we just go ahead and release a whole new sequel. And they basically gave you a full whole game, no DLC, no nothing like that. They just gave you the full wham bam kabam right there when they released the sequel. I think it was in September of 2011. Now Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 was around the time that I started getting into the FGC, so it really holds a special place in my heart. It's a game that I truly love just because of how it got me into the FGC of those times when it and Street Fighter 4 was always in the tournaments. I mean, fantastic stuff. I'm talking about legendary times just, I mean, just haven't felt like that since to me. But you know, it's probably just a nostalgic thing. You know, when you came in, is the most nostalgic to you. But 2011 and 2012 was actually a great year for tag fighters, because along with UMVC2, we actually got Tekken Tag 2 and Skullgirls. Now Skullgirls is a game that's well respected in the FGC, is really loved in the FGC. A lot of people actually don't know that this game came out in 2012 and that it's actually this old, because the game has grinded so much throughout the years to get the respect of where it's at, that it eventually landed at Evo in 2022, a whole decade later after the game had released. So you can tell is definitely a game that has put forth a lot of effort to gain its respect in the scene. But Tekken Tag 2, I mean, when I tell you Tekken Tag 2 is probably one of the most perfect games to me. It was actually one of the games that I put forth a lot of effort into to actually get good at fighting games. It was one of the games that I played against my friends and stuff a lot with competitively. It was just a fun game to me, just really a masterpiece to me. I really wish that they would just go ahead and make a Tekken Tag 3.
Tag, please hold off on that. As we mentioned way back when we did Tag 2, try to have 4 characters on screen at the same time. Obviously, it really limits your resources, so the stage would have to be really pared down to something that's not that immersive. So that's not really realistic at this point, at the moment. So please hold off on the tag comments for now.
But you know, that's just, we not gonna get into the angle right now. Oh, and how could I forget? The controversial Street Fighter Cross Tekken actually came out this year. Now, we've done a video on this before everybody starts throwing stones at their phone, at their computers, because I just said their name. You have to admit, the initial hype for that game was fantastic. People really wanted that game. Also, in the state that it is in now, a lot of people are saying that it's a fantastic game, well worth picking up, it's super fun. Now, with this initial release, yes, it had a hard time. On this DLC, the gem system, Pandora, there's so many different things that can be said about what happened with the release of Street Fighter Cross Tekken. We actually did a video on that. You can go check it out if you want. Stroll through the comments and you will see why people just have so many mixed emotions about this game. We'll just say that. But you just have to admit, when it was coming out, it was very hyped. So for the years of 2011 and 2012, the FGC was eating when it came to tag fighters. Now, if we don't include the Skullgirls updates and any Dead or Alive games, we don't get the next so-called big tag fighter game until 2017, which was Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. Now, first off, I'd like to say before we get into this game that I respected Disney a lot before this game released. I just thought that they could do no wrong. Everything they touched turned to gold, blase. You know, I was blinded. I was blinded by the Disney hype. The mouse had me. But when MVCI came out, it totally changed my perception of Disney. The mouse can definitely do wrong in my eyes because he released MVCI. He was one of the main reasons why MVC came out the way it is. But we go once again, hold off on me going on a tangent. If you look at the reviews of this game, a lot of times the only redeeming quality that they gave the game was actually the gameplay is actually really solid. But when it comes to everything else of the game, the looks, the looks of the game, I mean, it's just self-explanatory if you was there. The music, the stages, and going back to actually 2v2, which me personally, I thought was kind of lazy because we hadn't seen 2v2 in the Versus series since Marvel vs. Capcom 1. So why are we going backwards? Most of the characters that we wanted were gone. And you know, let's just stop hurting ourselves talking about this game. Obviously, when MVCI came out, it tarnished what was going on with the tag fighters game. So like I said before that, it was 2011 2012 that we had got good tag fighters, and we were waiting for another one. After a while, I mean, after 5 years, we hadn't got another one, and it wasn't until 2017 that we got MVCI, and it didn't do really well. However, in 2018, Blaze Blue Cross Tag Battle and SNK Heroines Tag Team Frenzy actually came out. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and act like I know a lot about these two. I went and did my research to see when they came out. I read a little bit about the games, but one thing I knew even before researching this, knowing from the fighting game community, that Blaze Blue Cross Tag was an amazing game. People are still clamoring for that game. People still want that game. You could go in on Twitter right now and type in BB Tag 2, and you're gonna see a bunch of people on Twitter still talking about, up to literally 2 days ago, talking about how much they want BB Tag 2. I mean, BB Tag 1 is the highest selling Blaze Blue game of all time. So I ought to let you know that people actually want the game. So it's been since 2018 that they got it, which has been 6 years now, and they still haven't got the game. And people would tear down a wall for this game if it was released. But for some reason, they're not releasing it. But oh, how could I forget? In 2018, we also got Dragon Ball FighterZ. Now, Dragon Ball FighterZ was a game that many people have been waiting for forever. Everybody loves Dragon Ball Z. Everybody knows Dragon Ball Z. If you played fighting games, you know what Dragon Ball Z is. Stop lying. So many people just couldn't wait for a real Dragon Ball fighting game. Now I say real Dragon Ball fighting game because we was waiting for a 2D classical style fighting game of Dragon Ball Z. We got all the arena fighters, we got all the Super Dragon Ball Z's and Ultimate Battle 22. We didn't want none of that no more. We wanted a legit fighting game, and Arc System Works and Bandai Namco came and gave us what we wanted. The game did fantastic, as you would imagine. I mean, it's Dragon Ball Z. Everybody and their grandma know Dragon Ball Z, so you know everybody in the fighting game community was going to play it. So that was doing fantastic. But you know, in 2018 we were not too long from the pandemic that actually happened. Now in the pandemic, so many games suffered because they didn't have really good netcode. Grand Blue Fantasy Versus was one of them. It was a fantastic game, but it came out during a time where it's like the world was suffering and you had to stay in the house and it didn't have a good online play. So during that time, the transition of making sure games had excellent netcode was happening, and Dragon Ball FighterZ kind of didn't release with that. So it wasn't until this year of 2024 that actually came out. But when we go to the year 2024, it was kind of too little too late. I mean, it's kind of been so many years since the game's life cycle, but I mean, get it when you get it. But it actually came out horrible, and one of the rumors of why it came out horrible is that Arc System Works actually stopped working with Bandai Namco. Now with Arc System Works stopping working with Bandai Namco, I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory of, so that means we probably not gonna get a Dragon Ball FighterZ 2. And it seemed like that's not gonna happen. So that has kind of killed the hopes for Dragon Ball Z fans that wanted to continue doing a fighter, because the people still love the game. They just wanted some stuff fixed, you know, this here, this there, add some netcode. We good, we'll carry it on, we'll go on for forever until you release the next one. But that didn't happen, and the game is basically falling flat on its face and it's dying. So now we're at a point with the tag fighting genre to where it's like, what's next? I mean, everything that we've talked about so far, either it came to an end to where it's like the game did horrible, or the game did great and they just stopped being made. It's not like it was a plethora upon plethora of tag fighting games. No, it's only a select few. So once again, we see how Capcom can hold so much weight in the FGC. It was leading the charge of that genre, and they basically fumbled the ball, and they hadn't said nothing about it recently. But if we being honest, if you look at a lot of these tag fighters, you can tell that they're not the main priority of the people that make them. I mean, if you look at Capcom, you can see they'll go 10 years without making a tag fighter. I mean, it was 10 years from MVC2 to MVC3. Then from MVC3 to I was 6 years. So going by that math of their release schedule, you wouldn't be surprised if you don't get another Marvel vs. Capcom until 2027. And so with Bandai, they went 10 years between Tekken Tag 1 and Tekken Tag 2. So a decade from Tekken Tag 2, 2012 is 2022. It's been 2 years since then, but they just released Tekken 8, so you know no Tekken Tag 3 is going to be probably coming out anytime soon. So to go back through, MVC seems done, Dragon Ball FighterZ seems to be over, BB Tag, I mean, that's basically in the Bermuda Triangle somewhere. No thought in the mind for Tekken Tag 3 from Bandai Namco. Another Tekken and Street Fighter crossover? Harada's basically laughing at that. So what does the genre right now have to look for except for 2XKO? Now most likely 2XKO would be the new Dylon, but what if it doesn't? Then the genre is basically dead. There's nothing else to hope for outside of 2XKO. 2XKO is basically going to need to be the tag fighter's savior for this thing to continue on. And as fans of tag fighters, I hate it, but at the same time, I'm grateful for the hope. So 2XKO has a lot on its shoulders, not just because people are excited about, you know, a League of Legends fighter, but in the fighting game community, we need a tag fighter right now. If it's not going to be 2XKO, then who? So you guys let me know in the comment section what you guys think down below. I really want to see tag fighters continue. Do you guys really care too much about tag fighters? Y'all let me know in the comment section down below.